together. Is he the right one for me? Marriage, parenting, you name it. We're just going to be here for the next, 54 minutes until I have to leave for my teenage son's orthodontist appointment to answer your questions on anything. So, Crystalina, good to have you back in the studio.
Yay, it's nice to be here and also to do this together, right? It's
Yeah.
awesome. We haven't been doing that, and it's just been so busy as well. And we have three of our teenagers graduating, one this week and then two next week. So life is incredibly hectic for those of you out there dealing with graduations. If you're going to be graduating yourself or you have siblings graduating, there's a lot going on in our household right now. So
A lot going on in the church, too. Got a new pope from Chicago. How awesome is that? Today is also the Feast of Our Lady of Fatima and the 24th anniversary of the assassination attempt on the life of St. John Paul II, when Mehmet Ali Agca, who is a hired Turkish assassin, tried to kill him in St. Peter's Square. They asked John Paul later, who do you think did this? Was it the Turks, the Bulgarians, the Russians, or whatever? And he said, the devil can conspire in 1,000 ways, none of which interest me. So John Paul just knew, God's hand was going to protect him, lead him. But imagine if that bullet had killed the Holy Father. We wouldn't have had World Youth Days. Theology body would be only halfway proclaimed. Catechism of the Catholic Church, Code of Canon Law. I mean, man. So praise God for 24 years today, his life being spared. In fact, when he was shot, the ambulance, rushed him to the hospital, and he got there. The operating room had already been prepared because there was an Italian soccer player who was planning on having surgery that day anyway. And so they said, you're going to have to need to wait. Holy Father's got an operation. So everything was already prepared for the Holy Father. They was pretty sure that he was going to pass away, but everything was prepared in divine providence. And then after he finished his time at the hospital, he came to the window of the Vatican and said, now Act 2 begins. And so, in other words, the second part of a play that a divine playwright had written was about to unfold. And so thanks be to God, 24 years ago today, John Paul's life was spared. So,
if you're a part of that generation that grew up with Pope John Paul II and went to any of his World Youth Days, I was there in Colorado, to go back and watch those again. They are full of so much just rich fruit and so much to help your spirituality right now. And it's like he is just a saint of our time right now. He was back then, but now, and I think generations to come. But it's really interesting going back and watching that and how he's really just speaking to the heart of the person and just raising them up above the culture and everything going on to their calling and what God is really calling them to be. And he's still doing that now. So to go back and listen to those are really interesting. It seems like everyone's embracing a little more, not so afraid of the new Pope.
Yeah, they've warmed up a little bit and getting over their initial shock. But World Youth Day was kind of funny in Denver. That's the first time you and I were in each other's presence without realizing it.
It was really weird the way God.
Well, we didn't know. I mean, we could have walked literally right past each other, and our guardian angel would be like, hey, see you in 10 years.
Yeah.
You never know what God's up to. But speaking of dating and relationships, we've got some questions coming in. If you want to ask a question, the show basically exists for you guys. So you can email in your question at live@chastity.com. It can be anonymous, or you can join us on the Discord server where you can actually call in and we can talk over the phone through the Discord server. And so I'm going ahead and do either one of those that you want, but I believe, Josiah, we've got some leftover questions from last week as we wait for the ones to come in live. Do you want to dive through some of those?
Yeah, we have one from last week. Somebody asked about a case. I couldn't tell if it was hypothetical or not, about somebody getting married if someone had been sterilized due to mental illness of some kind, whether that be hallucinatory, schizophrenia-like, or I don't know what the technical word is but other mental disabilities, I guess.
Okay. I mean, I think the church would allow a person who is not fertile to get married. We had need to distinguish infertility, sterility, and impotence as three distinct categories. So infertility is essentially defined as you're having difficulty conceiving. Like you've been trying for 6 months, no luck. It doesn't mean you're necessarily sterile. It implies that you're not impotent. Impotency is the inability to, perform the marital act as it should be. Now, because of drugs and things like that, impotency is not as much of a big thing as it used to be. But as long as you can perform the marital act, you're not really in charge of the outcome of it, whether the person become fertilized, become pregnant or not. That's beyond your power. And so as long as a married couple can exchange the marital vows not only with their words, but with their bodies through consummating the act of lovemaking, then they can enter into a valid sacramental marriage. Now, if they are impotent, meaning they're incapable of the marital act, the church would teach that they're incapable of the sacrament of marriage. And people are like, oh, that's horrible. Jesus would never say anything like that. He actually did. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus talks about eunuchs as being incapable of marriage. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If a person can love and commit and be faithful, can't they enter into what is a marriage? Jesus says no. A eunuch would be a person who is either castrated or impotent at birth because of a health defect or whatever. And typically these people would serve as guardians and servants of the queen because they were seen as not a threat to her sexuality because they weren't capable of engaging in the sexual act anyway. And so they'd be entrusted to taking care of the queen. So those would be the eunuchs under a king. And Jesus says that they're not actually capable of entering into what is a marriage. And so Jesus sees the one flesh union is not just kind of an optional add-on, but an actual consummation of the vows that you speak with your words. So if you have a person who had been sterilized, and so let's say they went through a tubal ligation, a vasectomy, the church would still teach that person is capable of entering into what is a marriage because they're capable of entering into the marital act, even though they're not capable of becoming fertilized or fertilizing the other. That being said, the church would encourage you to pray about a sterilization reversal. Those things are often possible, especially for the man. It's a much better outcome of that thing being reversed than a tubal ligation, but it's something you might want to pray about. You don't have to go through a second surgery to reverse it, but it's something worth praying about. And so the church would say, yes, no, having had a sterilization procedure would not necessarily invalidate the marriage. But the second question to look at is the mental health of the person that you would want to marry. If this person has a severe mental health illness, that could be an impediment to forming a sacramental bond, because the question is, are they capable of fulfilling the essential obligations of the marital life? And they might be able to do that physically through the sexual act, but are they able to do it relationally? Are they able to form that bond of love? And so this would be a good question for a good Catholic spiritual director, finding a good priest. Father, hey, do you think that, we'd make a good couple? Because if he knows the history of mental illness, if it's so incredibly severe that they had to be sterilized because of it, that's something to look at. Is there treatment going on? Is there progress that's being made? Are they capable of entering into what is a marriage? Now, obviously, there's plenty of people with mental health challenges, from depression, anxiety, you name it, that are able to form and have very successful marriages. But find a good priest. Get someone who can really guide you through this process. I know some priests that instead of just giving their couples the focus test, which is kind of a helpful thing of potential red flags, he actually gives them the entire paperwork for the annulment process while they're engaged. Go through all 100+ questions now, because I ain't going to deal with it 5 years from now. Really some heavy lifting, deep dive stuff. Big boy, big girl marriage preparation stuff. So if you think there may be questions of, hey, could the mental illness really impair our ability to have a functional marriage? Find a good priest, go through the questions, at least the focus test, and they'll be able to show you. So again, to sum up, sterilization procedure having been taking place in the past is not necessarily an impediment to forming a sacramental marriage, because if it were, then, women post-menopause wouldn't be capable of entering into a marriage because they can't get pregnant. But that's never been the church's teaching. And so hope that helps out. Any other thoughts on that?
So let's say a eunuch, right? A person who's incapable and
yeah.
Do they just become consecrated?
A person who is a eunuch could choose to, they could choose to live the religious life. They could choose to become a woman could become a consecrated virgin, could become brother, or just serve the church in the single state. You think of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, Blessed Carlo Acutis. These are guys who were not married, who are, probably this summer becoming saints. And so just because that your calling might not be to live out the image of Christ's love for the church through the sacrament of marriage, that doesn't mean you're not called to the religious life or to serve God in the single state. Now, strictly speaking, canonically, vocations are something that you're making a vow in. So priesthood, religious life, married life. Technically, the single life is not a vocation in a strict sense of canon law, but it is in the lowercase v vocation of a calling that sometimes God gives to people. And so God does not call everybody to get married, doesn't call everybody to be a priest. Some people live in just fear, of the religious life. Oh, God, don't pick me. God, don't pick me. Like, you're hiding.
We see you hiding.
Like, it's like you didn't study for a test and, the teacher could call on you. And but there's no need to live in fear, because if God gives you the calling, he'll actually give you the desire. And so often your desires, if you're living in God's will, are a pretty good indication of where he's calling you, because he's a father and he wants you to be happy. He's not looking for prisoners. He doesn't want a religious congregation, the inmates of the interior life. And, y'all wear orange habits with numbers on them. Like, he's not calling you to that. He's calling you to something where you'll have fulfillment. So be at peace. No need for anxiety.
Yeah, but also I want to push back a little on that of just you don't always have
your
that
mic, please.
desire. You don't always have that desire or that feeling of wanting to, because there's things that God has asked me in my life that I didn't want to do, but I had peace knowing, okay, this is what he wants, and I kind of this is his will, and you go through it, but at the same time I didn't desire it. It was almost hard to give up. And I'm sure some of you are scared you're graduating, or you're just know God's maybe tugging on your heart in that direction, and you have a vocation, and that can be a very scary, daunting thing. But at the same time, you don't want to go through life always wondering, why didn't I look more into this? Why didn't I just take that time, and something that's haunting you 10 years or 15 years down the road when you're married and have kids, and it's there in the back of your mind, why didn't I?
Yeah.
That would be horrible. So don't do that to yourself. Just have the courage and just kind of leap into it, right?
Yeah. And I think the most overlooked aspect of discernment is just action.
Yeah.
Just don't novena this thing to death. Go do something. Check out the seminary. Talk to some sisters. Hey, sister, how did you hear your calling? Can I hang out at the convent for a weekend? Just check it out. Because I know guys who have been I think God's calling me to the priesthood, but I'm afraid I'm going to give it a try. They go to the seminary for a couple of months, a couple of years, and discover, okay, this was not my calling. And then they leave, but they leave in peace. And they're able to form many times happy, awesome marriages. And they've got this foundation of the interior life that they learned in the seminary that they carry into their vocation as the priest of the domestic church. And so had they never had the courage to give it a try, they might have still gotten married, but always wondered, I wonder if I was supposed to be a priest, and just kind of have that hanging over you. I don't think you need that. So just be brave, be bold, give it a shot, see what happens.
Yeah. There's such an extreme right now. I'm saying it because of graduation time. There's all these graduation parties and all of these one last time things people are wanting to do that aren't necessarily good, or I'm going to go get locked down at college, so I better just live it up right now while I can with my friends. I may never see them again kind of attitude, and just diving into everything for the excuse of, but I don't want to regret. I need to live life to the fullest right now kind of thing. And it's you don't want to weigh your time you have now at home with your friends and this joyous time with having to wake up and go to confession.
Yeah.
Right? It's the worst. So I don't know. I just encourage you, be careful, tread cautiously in these next couple weeks as graduation parties and everything are going on. You don't want to kind of backslide into things you're going to regret.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to, do we trust the Father or not? Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. The root of sin is disbelieving that. Of you're not coming to give me an abundant life. You're coming to shackle me, and you're coming to take away my freedom. And so I've got to have a little bit of my life just to myself. I'll give you that, whether I'll give you 80%, 50%, 10%, whatever, but I got to have my part. And in that, I retain my identity. And it's no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
If we give him everything, we find ourselves. John Paul said, every man who seeks the kingdom of God will find himself. So
I got some questions.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. So we have 5 actually. So
Okay.
Here we go. The first one is, what can men do to prevent women from lusting? Asking about male modesty. What does that look like?
Ooh, I like that.
Oh, let's hear it. No, you're the lady. He's asking what?
you.
No. What can men do to help women not lust? So what does a woman need in order to, from a guy, in terms of his modesty of whether his speech, his clothing, his flirting, his intentions, what would make it, because people think, oh, lust, that's a guy problem. It's not a girl issue. I mean, Kelsey Skoke came out with a great book called Uncompromising Purity. It's not just a guy problem. And so I think any girls that struggle with sexual temptations, I remember one of them, I think, saying to her, like, I'm so ashamed I don't even sin in a feminine way. And it's like, whoa, like, no, we got to untwist that. This idea that if you're wrestling with your body, with your urges, with your desires for intimacy, that's a guy issue. That type of false shame will typically spin a person into the cycle of shame and isolation that just makes the issues worse. It's like, no, this is a human problem. So from a woman's perspective, what are ways that guys can make chastity easier to avoid lust from the woman's perspective? Because a lot of times we don't take you guys into consideration. We'd be happy, sometimes guys would say, I'd be glad to have a woman look at me with that kind of desire because I just don't feel that desirable, when in reality, I was reading today, Genesis 4, Cain saying, well, am I my brother's keeper? That type of attitude we have towards each other. So thoughts, give us some feedback for guys on how we can help women not to lust after us, because we know it's so difficult not to.
Okay, a couple of things
us.
that come to mind, and maybe not the route you thought I'd take. But first, I mean, if you're muscular and you're fit and you know it, when you know it, because we know you know it, don't wear such tight shirts. Don't try so hard, okay? And obviously some women like gravitate towards that and they like that. But if you're wearing shirts that are just like you're popping out of, don't. It's not modest.
Button, Jason.
Top button. I don't think that, to me, that's not modest. Like, you can go a size bigger than just like it's squeezing you, okay? But it also looks like you're trying too hard. Second, women are more not as visual. It's more like, isn't it more like their words and like how men talk to us, and like not to be over friendly? Because I know even just being kind to a girl, they're like, oh my gosh, he likes me. And you're like, whoa, I'm just being a nice guy right now. And they're like, is he my husband? Like there's no boundaries sometimes. And you just have some self-awareness when you are around women, because they almost take that as an invitation that you're inviting them to get closer and to flirt with them, and like, just be mindful of yourself, because some maybe attention you're giving someone isn't that kind of attention you wanted, but they're taking it that way. So to kind of have boundaries with women, because a woman will not get close to a guy, a lot of women at least, unless they feel welcomed. And just be careful how over welcoming you are when you are around the opposite sex, unless you're wanting to pursue her. But
yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is, as a guy, just check the modesty of your intentions.
Yeah, that's a good one. Intentions are everything.
Because a lot of times we can make it look like I'm just expressing affection or thoughtfulness or romance to her, just for the sake of just letting her know I love her. But, is there an intermingling there of an intention of, yeah, but it sure would be nice at the end of this date if we ended up alone, and on a couch, and just see what happens. I mean, we're not going to do everything, but, this would definitely make her a little more interested in doing X, Y, Z with me. Is that going on in my heart? Or am I really expressing tenderness, affection, kindness, thoughtfulness, romance to her just for the sake of her knowing that she's cherished and loved? Or am I doing this for potentially a seductive intention? And so we've got to take a deep look. As John Paul II said, has this, woman who's been entrusted me as a sister in humanity has not become in my heart an object of adultery. And so you might be all modest when it comes to your outfits or your speech, but like the hidden movements of my heart, why am I choosing to do this? Why am I going out of my way to do this to her or with her? Is it because I want something for me at the end of the date? If so, that's the modesty that needs to be practiced, because modesty is what it's doing. It's governing our exterior acts is what modesty is supposed to do. And so it just begins with the heart. And so I would say start there.
The thing I'm noticing, and and I'm totally going to get made fun of for even bringing this up, but I'm going to bring it up, that guys do. It's swimming pools, swim beaches, whatever. They're pulling their shorts like really low. Right? Their swimming trunks like super low. It just like completely grosses me out. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you know what you're doing? It's just like pull it up, tie it up, do what you need to do. Okay, like
just say no to crack.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Josiah, do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't go swimming a lot. So.
You know who you are, and you know what you're doing, and I know. Even people at the gym, it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
that's an immodest thing to me, where it's just like, just pull it up. Nobody wants to see that. So,
Yeah. They're just wear suspenders with your swimming
like,
trunks
I
or
know,
whatever it is.
Project 2025, we
yeah.
will have
I hope
gender
I just made
segregated
sense.
gyms.
There you go.
I'm just being
Um,
honest. Okay.
we've got email questions. They're a little heavier, so we're going to keep them all anonymous.
Okay.
Yes.
We have 3 questions here from our email, and then one more from our Discord here, but it's just text. So I'll go ahead and read this one, and then we'll keep chugging. My husband is a sex addict. He's on the path to recovery, rehab, 12 steps, etc. We are currently separated. I would like to try and reconcile and be with him on this road at some point, but my family is pressuring me to divorce him since the validity of our marriage is questionable. What do I do?
Wow. Well, I would say praise God for your fidelity, because the presumption is that the marriage is valid. That should be until proven otherwise, that's what the presumption should be. Now, you do have a right canonically as a spouse to take what's called a time of separation from your spouse as perhaps like a medicinal effect, that hopefully this will shock him into his senses of realizing, holy cow, what have I done? What has this become versus the day that we stood on that altar? And I promised I will be true to you. Maybe the sacrament of marriage brought up to the surface his faults that had been buried, that maybe you saw the red flags before marriage and thought, oh, this will change, this will get better. But as the years went on, it just got worse and worse to the breaking point of like, I can't do this anymore, whether it's you going to the strip clubs or online or with other women. I mean, you have an obligation, not just a right, to protect yourself physically from stuff you might bring at home, but just emotionally and mentally. Like sometimes it's just not safe for you and the kids. And so I want to affirm that decision to take a bit of a separation was probably the right one in your case. But if there's an openness on his behalf to continue going, whether it's to Sexaholics Anonymous, of course, or whatever, to see, is he tracking and making actual progress? Or is it this cyclical, I'm sorry, and then crash and burn, I'm sorry, crash and burn, and just this endless, like, he's not tracking in the right direction versus, the slip-ups used to be once a week, and now it's once every 3 months, and he's got an accountability partner, he's got software on his phone to block the stuff, he's going to a group, he's got a spiritual director, like, he's got a mental health professional he's working with to deal with the root issues, like, is he really taking extreme ownership of this whole issue in his life? Or is he gaslighting and punting and like, no, well, yeah, I fell because you're not available to me. And yeah, I had to mess up because you're not as skinny as you used to be. Like, is he trying to put the blame somewhere else, or is he owning it? And to me, that's the most important thing. Is he owning this? And if he is, then try to move forward and if he's not willing to go to counseling, you need to go to counseling for your own sake instead of thinking, oh, if we can't go together, we can't go at all. Find a good counselor. People that I'd recommend for him, Steve Picorni has a ministry called Freedom Coaching. If you just type in, Steve Picorni, Freedom Coaching, Catholic Porn Recovery, you'll find it online. And then likewise, Dr. Peter Kloponis is another good mental health professional that helps men break free from pornographic addictions or just lust addictions in general. The John Paul II Healing Center with Dr. Bob Schutz has awesome marriage intensives. We've went on a marriage retreat, was super helpful and healing for us. So the work of that. And then just for you, I would recommend Bloom for Catholic Women is a website. Just Google Bloom for Catholic Women. Go there because this is sexual betrayal trauma. And for anyone to tell you otherwise is just gaslighting. Like, this is a real form of betrayal and infidelity that he would look to another in a sexual way to find fulfillment. And so you need a community of people that's going to validate the hurt that you've been through and give you hope where there's cause for hope, and give you a smack upside the head if you are leading something on forever that's only heading in the wrong direction. And so is it possible that this marriage could have been null and void from the very get-go? It's a possibility. Is it a possibility that this marriage still can be saved and God can do miraculous things? We've seen it happen. I mean, we've seen marriages where, it was an absolute mess. We've gone through some major rough patches ourselves. And so I would say as much as you can to hold on to hope, especially if he's willing to do some extreme ownership. Jocko Willink does he's like this Navy SEAL guy that is all in motivational talks. He talks about a time he was over, I think it was in Afghanistan, and they were on a mission. and it just, everything went wrong. And I mean, they were getting shot at. I think some of their men died. It was just a disaster. And so they get called in by the colonel or whatever, and the colonel's like, dude, whose fault was this? And he steps up, it was my fault. I should have known where these guys were at. Communication dropped, and I should have done this. And then another one of his men said, no, it was my fault. I should have done this, and I lost sight of that, and I should have known we should have done that. And then, no, it was my fault. Every man kind of in his squadron or platoon or whatever all said, it's my fault. And it was at that point that the colonel, we need to keep this team together. These guys are the men that we want doing things, that they can actually own their fault instead of just dishing the blame to save their own tail. And so I think as long as your husband is willing to say, look, yeah, I messed up big time, and I'm sorry, and I own this, and I'm not going to blame my own shortcomings on you or my upbringing or this or that. We can heal, and I'm invested in it. If he's willing to do that, then I'd say to try to move forward. Crystal, thoughts?
I just want to reiterate to make sure you stay strong and you're taking care of you and your self-care, and have serious boundaries, and you know what those are, and you stick to them, and not to lower your standards of where you know you need to be, where you believe God is calling you to be, and stay incredibly close to the sacraments and Jesus right now in the Eucharist. He can get you through anything. He can give you that clarity. And it's really not always easy to be obedient, right? And maybe your family's pulling you one way, but deep down, you know, maybe this is what God wants. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your family wants, what anyone else is saying. All that matters is what you know God is asking you to do. And the only way to really know that is to stay close to the sacraments, to go to Mass, to go to confession, to make sure you're spending time in Eucharistic adoration. And I would take it a step further, because your case is so extreme, of fast for your situation, your husband, and clarity for this. Because a sex addiction, it's serious. There's a lot of serious things, but there's also that pornography, and just there's a lot of demons attached to those things. And I'm sure there's a lot of oppression on your husband and your marriage and everything else. But maybe this is a sign God is like pulling you away, and this is not what he wants for you, and it's hard. And you go to the boss, you go to Jesus, you sit down, you're just honest. And if you could really just seek his will, not the will of your family, not the will of you, what your husband's asking you to do right now because he seems a little broken, but what Jesus is asking you in this, and what his will is. And he will honor that. How can he not honor that? And don't forget to offer up your suffering, because I mean, it's gold in heaven. It's the price for souls, honestly, is just that suffering. And you can do great things with what you're going through right now with your suffering. It can change lives.
And then one last thought, a friend of our ministry and someone who helps us tremendously is Joey Pontarelli, runs a ministry called Restored. And one of the things the many things that he's done for the ministry is, we used to send letters to convents of nuns, like 100 convents of nuns, where we were looking the envelopes and the stamps and all this stuff and sending them out. He's like, you don't need to do that. We can automate
letters at a time.
And he's like, you can just automate the whole thing. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? And so he created a website called prayersfromnuns.com. So www.prayersfromnuns.com, where you can basically request prayers from a nun. And it actually costs money, because they will physically send a letter to all of these convents with your intentions on it. And so this is not a profit-making machine. It's just like, well, we've got to print the letters, envelopes, shipping, and all that stuff. And so you can essentially type in here, please pray for our marriage, please pray for my husband, here's the situation, click send, boom. I think it's the best investment you could possibly do, is get some of these serious heavy hitters spiritually. And these nuns will write you back and they're like, your prayer petition is sitting on the bulletin board outside of our adoration chapel, and we see it every time we go in there. Like, because sometimes people will put up a wall so high in their life, you have to go up to heaven to get over it. And, you know, maybe your husband's defenses are up. I don't know where he's at. But these prayers, these sisters can just make it rain on the other side of that. So prayersfromnuns.com.
I also think people go at things on such a worldly level, and this worldly mindset of going after it psychologically, physically, going to lawyers, going to counselors, but they don't go at the spiritual side of it as serious. They kind of just say a prayer to God here and there, but to go at it fiercely, spiritually, to maybe break those strongholds, to seek the will of God, to change your life right now, and just like go to God with everything and all these decisions, then you talk to other people, but get his counsel first and things. He can change your entire life. And maybe he's calling you to do that and restructure things. Because if you're dealing with this now and you're slaying that demon, you're cutting that serpent's head off generationally, you're protecting your kids from that same very thing that may go after them. And if it doesn't stop with you, it's going to continue with them. And I've experienced that in my own life. So I would really encourage you to go after this fiercely, spiritually, as much as you're going after everything else, because it really does matter.
And again, to reiterate what she said, don't feel guilty about your boundaries.
No.
They're healthy, they're necessary. In fact, boundaries without consequences, as they say, is just a form of nagging. And so if you put a boundary like, well, if you go to this again, then I'm not going to do this. Then he does it again. You're like, man, I don't want to cause conflict. I'll just let it slide. Stick prayerfully, decide what are my boundaries, what are the consequences, and then stick to that. Because sometimes when a person gets so deep into addiction, a lot of times the alcoholic has to lose his job before he realizes that he needs to sober up and quit blaming everyone for his life's problems. Sometimes they have to hit rock bottom. And so your consequences have a medicinal effect on his conscience. And so don't feel bad having those boundaries and following up with reasonable and godly consequences. So, Josiah, next question. What else we got coming in?
What advice do you have for married couples who are doing NFP, specifically the husband, since his urge for intimacy is greater?
Well, I think a lot of times when it comes to marriage prep, we're so busy selling NFP because a lot of the couples are, let's just be honest, they're contracepting, they're cohabiting, they're looking at porn, and man, if we could just get them to use NFP and, not do these things, then that's going to be a win. So we just try to sell NFP. Oh, it is just the best thing ever. And it's like going from honeymoon back to engagement, and it just keeps the intimacy alive, and it's like living the theology of the body. And, we get these people all, oh, wow, this sounds great, low divorce rate, all these perks. And they get married like, wait a minute. This is a pain in the butt. It's like, wait a minute, like the time that we can be close, I'm, in town, but we can't because we want to plan the fertility, but the time we can be close and you're not fertile, I'm, just the time isn't working out with my work schedule and I'm out of town. And like, my goodness, this is a pain in the neck. I think we need to do a better job as a church of saying, look, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
It's going to be a cross at times. Now couples who use NFP do have intimacy. They've studied this. As often as those who contracept, they simply time the intimacy differently. And in the end, they have a lot more intimacy because their divorce rate is in the ballpark of 4%. And so there is a sacrifice that's taking place. And so I find sometimes NFP will bring to the surface in the marriage an incomplete development of the virtue of chastity. That maybe we weren't that well behaved as dating an engaged couple, but then we thought, well, once we cross the finish line to marriage, all bets are off and we can just have it whenever we want. And then there are these boundaries, and it's like, well, wait a minute, this isn't fair. I thought I signed up for this, and there'd just be 100% access whenever we want 24/7, and that's not the case. And so chastity, I would say, in marriage, and John Paul actually reiterates this in Love Responsibility, is actually more demanding than chastity prior to marriage. But because the graces of the sacrament are available, we're capable of living it out. And so I think things that they could do is to realize, okay, what are other ways that we can build intimacy as a couple? Are we having date nights every week? Are we going to Eucharistic adoration? Are we praying? Are we fostering intellectual intimacy? Are we just having fun together as a couple? Or are we just so into this habit of like, that's how we get close, we get physical? NFP can kind of force you to discover new levels of intimacy and closeness in the relationship. But don't be afraid. I mean, love is not afraid of sacrifice, because sacrifice is the food of love. And so love demands sacrifice. In fact, John Paul II said, love is a constant challenge thrown to us by God. And so think of this. Love is a constant challenge thrown to us by God. And so those times where you want to be intimate, that's a challenge where you have to also discern, okay, why are we going through the trouble of NFP? Well, I thought it's because you said you were emotionally overwhelmed. You couldn't have more kids. Well, I thought we were using NFP because you were kind of stressed out at work and you didn't think we could afford another kid. Well, I don't know, things are better at work and I'm not so stressed out. Well, maybe we don't need to use NFP. Like, maybe it is time for another kid. And so part of the difficulty of NFP is to motivate you to talk about why you're going to such an extreme to use it in the first place. Because NFP is not the default. Good Catholics use NFP, bad Catholics use contraception. No, children are the supreme gift of marriage. The default position is openness to human life. And then you can fall back on NFP if you have a serious enough reason to practice it. And so let the difficulty of NFP spur you to have good conversations as to whether or not it's necessary to use it in the first place. Thoughts?
NFP is hard. I have issues with NFP.
Yeah.
But not
Imagine how
in a
hard it
bad
is
way.
for her to practice Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'm just going to be really honest about all of this.
Okay, fire away.
NFP is incredibly difficult. It's hard, and you
Stands
have
for
to
not
be
freaking practical.
so disciplined. Yes, say that again.
Stands for not freaking practical. That was a blog some woman wrote for our website.
It is, did she? It is practical, but you have to be incredibly disciplined with it. So if you were chaste before marriage and you just learn that discipline, and I mean, there's so many disciplines within marriage, and this is hard because you want to connect, you want to be close, and then maybe you can't take on another baby. Maybe it's too much. Maybe your body is going through something. Maybe you just had a baby and you're just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And you're afraid. And I've gone through that time in our lives where I've just been freaked out because I knew I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I really, at the end, because we have 11 children. We have 8 children here and 3 babies in heaven, okay? And I've gone through those 3 miscarriages, and it was hard and it was horrible. And I went through some really difficult pregnancies, and I've been bedridden, and I've had a C-section, and just, I mean, I've had 4 all in diapers at once, and he's traveling, and just thought I couldn't get through this, and I was a horrible mom and crying and just failing epically. But at the end of the day, I look back at all of it, and I thank God that I had my faith and that I let God almost kind of decided what was going to happen with these things. And there was a time where we tried to do NFP, but I was breastfeeding, it just didn't work, and I always ended up pregnant, and I was like angry and resentful, and it was hard at the time, and I really had to sift through a lot of my own brokenness as well. But at the same time, in all honesty, I look back and I thank God I didn't contracept, that we didn't do anything like that, because I look back at my Mary and my Lewis and all of my children that I have now, and I can't even imagine my life without them. And as difficult and hard as it was in the moment, or as scary, or whatever I was going through, God does know best. He gives us life and he takes it away, and he knows what we can handle and he knows what we can't. And he has given you those children specifically for you, nobody else in this universe, because you can handle it, and he's going to give you everything you need to handle that. And if you know you can't, be prayerful. It's okay. You have to step back. You use NFP. But at the end of the day, if you end up pregnant, you're just like, oh, I can't believe this, or it's too much, or I can't handle this, or what are we going to do? And you're crying, you're depressed, you're throwing pregnancy tests across the room at your husband like I did. I really did that. I was so distraught.
It's like
But
the
then-
Matrix. I was like,
in all
avoiding pregnancy.
honesty, though, it's hard, and we're
Somebody
gonna
please
be
draw
honest
that.
about it. Just be honest about it. It's hard, but it's worth it, and it does work if it is done right. It can. So don't think, oh, this is horrible. It is a beautiful mechanism that the church has for us and married couples, but you have to be incredibly disciplined. Not always what God wants, though, because you're opening the well springs of life every time you are intimate with your husband and bringing God into that, period.
And as much as you're able, try to find other couples that are practicing NLP as well. And the reason why I think that is so important is because one of the principal temptations that the evil one will give us during a time where practicing virtue is difficult is isolation of like, you're the only one having to go through this. This is unfair. You are the
you're the
only one.
only
This is
Catholic.
so, this is
Everyone
just,
struggles with it.
but I mean, I remember meeting a couple and their friends, it was a young married couple. I think they were pregnant at the time. And they said, our friends over on the East Coast, they went on their honeymoon and they got pregnant with twins. Then when the twins were born, the wife's fertility came back 2 months after the delivery of the twins, and they got pregnant with triplets. So they created
had the best Mother's Day ever.
They created 5 human lives before their first wedding anniversary. I mean, we're talking 5 kids in diapers before your second wedding anniversary. I mean, I could imagine when those 3 showed up, the wife would have been to the husband, you're sleeping in Tennessee, okay? Like, you are not allowed in my bedroom. You are not allowed to sneeze. Like, you are not anywhere near me. And so, I mean, but just
Good
know
for that guy.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's amazing.
But just But this,
Josiah.
to understand that the stress, the sleep deprivation, the tension in the marriage when you want to be close, and because you can't be close, you're maybe on edge a little bit more with each other, and it's difficult. It's like, you're not alone. Like, this is difficult, but it's okay because God's in the mess with us, and he's crafting and doing something beautiful in that furnace, that something's being forged here. And we've been really led to the belief we shouldn't have to suffer. We shouldn't have to go through
It's a
tough
lie.
stuff. If the air conditioning is too hot at 74, turn it to 73. You can put it down to 72. If 71 is too cold, like, we are so used to climate control and comfort and vented seats, and like everything, that when the tough happens, it's just like, this something's off. We got to get a medication for this. We got to fix it. But it's like, no, God's in the mess, and there's something he's trying to say to us. John Paul II, sometimes when he would suffer an illness, he said, I would try to ask the Lord, what are you trying to teach me in this suffering? And so ask that question to God. What are you trying to teach me about you, about marriage, about how to love my husband in this time of suffering? Because he's with you. Christ crucified is visiting your marriage. But don't disinvite the author of life. Just help us to know, God, what it is you're trying to teach us, and we will continue to trust us with our future and with our bodies.
One thing I've been really contemplating and just thinking about suffering and different times of suffering in my life and our lives and our kids' lives. And a lot of times when I have suffered in the past, right, and I wasn't kind of just as developed in my faith, there were times where I completely and utterly wasted my suffering. I would medicate through it. I would drink through it. I would smoke, or whatever it was before my conversion. I mean, I would absolutely waste the suffering, and whatever it is God was trying to do in me would go dormant. And I think a lot of people waste their suffering and they don't want to deal with it. It's hard. I want to be with my wife and I can't. And you get mad and you just like give in, or she doesn't want a baby and she's getting mad, and I've gone through that and she's like, no, and you're scared. But like, real suffering, there is a purpose in it. It is how God, we grow in him, we grow in our trust, we grow in our faith, we grow as people of faith in God. But if we don't want it and we drink it away, or we medicate it, or we're watching Netflix and we just want to avoid it and act like it's not there, then that beautiful grace of that suffering, whatever it is God is trying to do in you, will go dormant. And you will probably come back to that same kind of suffering in a different way, because he needs to do something in you. You were created for this plan, this purpose. And how can you step into that if you don't shed almost these things of the world that have their clutches on you? And suffering is a way almost maybe sometimes to do that. And if no one's told you this, to follow Jesus and to live your faith is going to be hard. It is hard. There's nothing easy really about it. It's beautiful. You get graces. God is with you. He carries you through it. But at the same time, it's going to be hard. But that's okay, because he's going to give you everything you need to balance it out. But don't waste your suffering, because it's there for a reason. And at the end, when you look back and you go through it, right? You don't medicate, you don't numb through it. You actually go through the suffering and do it with Jesus and let him just like do whatever needs to be done in you. You'll look back and a lot of people, they thank God for their suffering. They're like, I wouldn't be the person I am right now, or I couldn't do what I'm doing if I didn't suffer and go through that cross. So don't be afraid to carry it and embrace it fully. To see what God is trying to do in you, because it's a great work and you don't even realize it at the time.
And offer this up for something specific in your life. We are offering up this time of absence and suffering for the vocations of our children. So you're putting a target on it. Like this angst, this suffering is being offered up for something very focused. One just final thought is, I remember a friend of mine sharing this meditation with me, that imagine you get to heaven, and then you're like, God, why all that suffering? Like, you gave me this huge cross, and Jesus takes you to this room just full of all these crosses of different sizes. And he's like, well, which one would you have rather had? Do you want that one, this one? They're all different shapes. And you're like, you find that little one in the corner, like, oh, that little one, that's the one I wanted. God's like, that's the one I gave you. Okay. The little dinky one in the corner. Because I mean, do you know how many people would love to trade places with you? How about the singles out there who just would love to find a spouse, but they can't find a good spouse? Or what about the spouses who are married and can't have kids? and have just been praying and going to fertility doctors and this and that, and all they want is one successful full-term pregnancy, and they've had miscarriages, they've had infertility, they've had everything. You start thinking, okay, do you want to swap those crosses? Like, would you like the cross of the single person? Would you like the cross of the infertile couple? Like, would you like to trade? A lot of times that puts us in check real fast. It's like, no, I wouldn't. I'm good. I'll be quiet. God, thank you thank you that this gets to be my cross, because there's thorns, but you got a beautiful rose at the end of that thorn, right? Yeah, there's some suffering there, but there's something beautiful. The relationship you have with your husband, perhaps the children you already have, or that you could have at a moment's notice if you just wanted another child. Like, what a blessing, what a gift that you have in the midst of this thorn. And so make sure you're looking at this thing in the perspective of eternity, of all these different crosses. I mean, you might walk into your laundry room and be like, I cannot believe this. Look at it. It's like a monster laundry everywhere, falling all over the place. There's kids' socks everywhere. It's like, okay, well, do you want to trade places the woman who washes her kids' clothes in the creek? Do you want to change places with the person who's got to use a laundromat with 4 quarters at a time? Do you want to change places with the woman who doesn't have any kids, so she's got no kids' laundries to do? I mean, you really start thinking about all the crosses out there, and we have the rinky-dink one in the corner. We do. And so let's praise God for the cross that he's given to us, because he's shaping us through that suffering.
And not to dismiss your suffering and your unique suffering in any way, but because it's real, it's real. But at the same time, when I do think of those things and other people and what they're going through, just kind of step back, and I understand. So. All right, Josiah.
What else we got coming up? I think we got less than 10 minutes. We're going to run off to the teenagers' orthodontist appointment.
8 minutes. So we've got, we will take one more email question here. We've got some more. And if you're also in the Discord, I see there's some people in the Discord. We'll take, actually, somebody just raised their hand to speak. So we'll bring them up, and we'll get to the rest of the questions next week. So I'll bring up Tuba NJMN.
Hey there.
Hold on. Alrighty, go ahead, Tuba.
Hello. So,
Hi.
my big question is it, how long must somebody be free from pornography before start to date? Is it 2 years, or does it have to be a lot longer than that? Because I definitely know that 6 months is not long enough at all.
Okay, good question. Obviously, the church, as you know, doesn't have a formula on this. Like, if it's been 8 months, you're good. If it's 7 months, it's too short. I think part of it depends upon the severity of the addiction beforehand. It was like, yeah, it's just something I struggled with for a couple of months, and it wasn't really that intense, versus no, this was a deep-seated addiction that had been in place since 6th grade, and now I'm 27 years old, and this is my first 6 months of sobriety ever away from the stuff. So you've really got to gauge, the severity of it, what's the likelihood of the relapse going on. But having 6 months under your belt, I think, is obviously a good start of like, hey, this is good. I finally got some things in place, whether it be accountability, a spiritual director, answerable to people. I've got the software on my phone. And I tend to take a pretty hard line on it. Like, don't ask a girl on a date if you're still looking at porn, because you can't ask a woman to commit to you unless you are prepared to be faithful to her. Because looking at porn is an act of infidelity. And if I cannot promise a girl that I'll be faithful, I've got no business asking for her heart in the first place. But to me, if you've got a half a year of sobriety under your belt and things are tracking, you've got that stuff in place, to me, it's a really good start. So I would say 2 years is probably more than I think would be necessary in terms of sobriety and being free from that stuff. I think we need to make sure that, like when the angel appeared to Joseph, do not be afraid to take Mary to yourself. And so in the same respect, don't be afraid to take on the responsibility of the heart of a woman, because this will also be part of the healing process. This will also give you additional motivation, because sometimes if we think I have to get so perfect for years and years and years of perfection, then I can finally ask a girl on a date and oops, I messed up, got to start over, 2-year reset. It's like you could be 49 years old before you ask anybody on a date. And so I think as long as you're really tracking in the right direction, you got at least 6 months of sobriety going on, you've got the good safeguard measures put into place, I think being in a relationship could help you to stay pure. And what are you thinking?
Temptation does not have an expiration date. And so you're always going to have to kind of keep yourself in check no matter what. but to kind of like slowly get back into the dating scene or going and maybe pursuing a woman, just start being friends with them. Just put yourself around them, see how you are, your inclinations, are you where your eyes are going, where your thoughts are going, are you going home and wanting to do things? Like, just put yourself slowly more and more in situations with women and see how you respond to that, and being friends with them. And maybe you already have really good close friends, but I would honestly start there, because little things are going to start coming up to the surface of tentacles of this thing, because it won't be able to help itself. And then you'll see, okay, whoa, I need to go cut the serpent's head off over there. I need to cut this off over here because I'm having a tendency towards here. And then you'll know, because you know when you're struggling, you know where you have issues, you know the places you go, the music you listen to, the situations you put yourself in, and are you still really having that temptation to go there? Because when you really truly heal of something or an addiction, what I've experienced in the past is you don't crave those same things. Like, the devil can't work on you in the same way. It is shut down, been there, done that, sealed by God. It's not happening anymore, over. But if you're still like, oh, when you have these like urges, and you are going to be tested, and as you should, but at the same time, just have a lot of self-awareness and spiritually take a lot of inventory of where you're at, and just stay close in that grace and that light, because the devil cannot operate in the light. He cannot operate in transparency. And if you keep yourself there in that light, the devil has no wiggle room, but you know yourself and you know where you fall. But I would just start off by putting yourself more and more with women and just see how you handle it first.
Yeah, there's a saint who said, a sin disclosed is half overcome. And so if you've got a good spiritual director, he knows where you're tracking in terms of the progress, trust him. Find a good spiritual director and just be totally transparent and vulnerable with him. And he might be like, hey, I think you're being a little too scrupulous here. I think you're ready to go and, embark on your vocation. Because this idea that like, no, you got to get so perfect before you even begin can often lead to discouragement. And that's the principal temptation the evil one will impress, especially after a fall. Here you go again. You messed up again. And you kind of looked at her that way. I don't think you're quite ready. Because the last thing the devil wants is for you to have a holy vocation. I mean, that you haven't been a father and kids and the marriage. No. Because he knows that the biggest weapon that God has is holy families. I mean, that's what God used to create, redemption in the first place, was a little holy family. And so God wants to replicate those. And so the devil's going to do everything he can to just sabotage that. And so your vocation, try not to be overly scrupulous with it. Find a good, solid spiritual director. And, I commend you for the progress that you're making. And I also commend you for the love that you have for a woman's heart, that you don't want to lead her on without being prepared to hold her heart and take care of it. But I would just reiterate to you the words from the angel to Joseph: do not be afraid to take Our Lady into your home. So,
and also one last quick thing is, say that like kind of scary prayer and just be straight with God and say, okay, please reveal my weaknesses in this, because you want to heal them. But just say, Jesus, reveal my weakness in this so it can be dealt with. And he will. You ask him straight out, you give him permission to show you your weaknesses, he will point them right out to you, I promise. So just keep saying that prayer and stay close to him.
And that's powerful because, his power is made perfect in weakness. And so it's not a matter of just like, oh, look at all these faults I have. It's like, wow, I really am a child. God, I need you to carry me. And then our confidence is in him instead of just pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps and white knuckling with all these sin management techniques. Ultimately, your confidence is in him rather than yourself. But you're a son of God. You've been baptized, so you got the Trinity in you. And so you've got this. So it is the top of the hour. And so we want to encourage anyone watching. We're going to be at this every single week. And so start thinking of questions that you have. Obviously, they're piling up on the back end and we can't get to every single one. We do give precedence in terms of priority of questions to patrons that support us and join our community at Patreon. So patreon.com/Jason Everett helps to support our family, supports the podcast, and just helps keep this whole mission going. And so if you want to become a patron, we will prioritize your questions and make sure to get to those at the top of the show, every single show. Josiah, any other notes before we sign off for today?
Email live@chastity.com. Leave your questions in the comments of this video, and join the Discord server. I think we're doing evening next week, if I remember right. So
Yeah. So we'll keep you posted through social media, through email, letting you know when the call-in show is going to take place. And again, thank you guys for tuning in today. Please pray for us and be assured of our prayers in return. God bless.
Yep.
God bless.
Follow
you.
at
See
Jason
you
Everett
next
on
week.
Twitter, at Jason Everett on YouTube, and Jason and Crystalina Everett on Facebook.
Amen.
There we go.